Hello, I'm Caroline Steele. This is the BBC World Service, and welcome to The Engineers. This year, we're at the Science Specialist University, Imperial College London, and we're here to focus on the technical revolution defining our era, artificial intelligence. I'm joined by a panel of 3 world leaders in the field and a large, enthusiastic audience in Imperial's Great Hall. Already, a computer can defeat the world's greatest player at our most complex strategy game. The first movie, written entirely by AI, has just been released, and AI may have discovered our first antibiotic in 3 decades. Together with our partners Royal Commission 1851, we've brought together 3 engineers at the cutting edge of this field to discuss their work and what it means for us humans. Paolo Pirjonian is Armenian, but he was born in Iran and started his career working on Mars rovers for NASA. He's now founder and CEO of Embodied, which is a company that builds emotionally intelligent robots to help with child development. David Silver is from the UK, where he's principal research scientist at the AI research lab Google DeepMind. He led the team that used AI to defeat the world's best player at the complicated strategy game Go. And he's working on artificial general intelligence. Regina Barzilai is Israeli-American and a distinguished professor for AI and health at MIT in the US. She created a major breakthrough in detecting early-stage breast cancer and also led the team that used AI to discover what is hoped to be a brand new antibiotic. So please do join me in welcoming them all. Regina, let's start with you. So what is it that made you shift your work to oncology? Sadly, you were in the perfect position to do that, weren't you?
Yeah, so actually I started my work at MIT in 2003 as a faculty, and I was working on natural language processing and AI. And in 2014, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was treated in one of the best hospitals in the United States, Massachusetts General Hospital. And what I discovered going through the treatment, that there was really no AI or not even basic information technology as part of the treatment, neither the diagnostics, nor the treatment, nor the post-treatment. And, after I was treated, I just was totally confused as to what I want to do, because it was the first time I realized that, my life is finite. And I've seen a lot of very sick people there surrounding me. And I was thinking, what can I do? And MGH, this hospital, and MIT are just one subway stop away. They're separated by a bridge. I'm thinking, how come we have all this great technology at MIT, but none of it is actually coming to the hospitals and helping patients? So after I finished my treatment, I still didn't have my hair. I started kind of going from doctor to doctor, asking them, how I can bring AI. I will do it for free. I'm a professor. So there were not many takers, but eventually we found somebody who, it was a doctor called Connie Lehman, who had the idea that we can apply AI to do early detection of cancer.
Thank you, Regina. David, you came to AI via the games industry, and you did a PhD in reinforcement learning. What is reinforcement learning, and how did you use it in those early days?
Yeah, so I guess I started out in the games industry before I went back to academia, and I was working on building computer games. And as a big part of building computer games is building the AI for those games that kind of makes all of the characters move around. And I found myself being fundamentally disappointed by the methods that were being used in those games. And it felt like what I really wanted to do was build something that had real AI in it. I discovered this idea of reinforcement learning, which is basically a method very much like those that animals and humans use, where the system is able to learn for itself from experience, from trial and error, from trying things out and seeing what works and what doesn't.
So is it sort of like when we learn to not touch fire because at some point we try it and it really hurts, and we learn don't do that in the future because the consequences aren't appealing? Is it sort of like how humans learn reinforcement learning?
Yes, it's a lot like that. So So, in fact, humans are believed to have a major part of the brain which is devoted to providing a signal, giving feedback that makes the brain actually learn to do more of the good things and less of the bad things. And so actually that's inspired a lot of work in machine learning to make machines have that same capability.
But a machine doesn't feel heat or isn't rewarded by a cookie. How can you reward a machine?
Yeah, so for a machine, it's just a number.
What?
You give it, so you give it a positive number if it's done something good and a negative number if it's done something bad. And at the end of the day, everything stems from that one single number. So this one single number, which we call the reward, contains enormous power because it's the signal that drives everything.
Paolo, you said your experiences of feeling alienated in foreign countries made you want to create an imaginary friend. And I'm sure much of our audience can relate to having an imaginary friend, but for most of us, they stay imaginary. How did you go about making a real one?
So, unfortunately, there's a lot of people in need of companionship or therapy, and there's a massive gap of labor force that can provide this. As an example, to use numbers from the US, we know the prevalence of things such as autism is growing rapidly. 10 years ago, it was 1 out of about 200 kids. Today, it's 1 out of about 30 kids. So the experiences I had, which was leaving my family at a very young age, living abroad in a society that's amazing. I mean, Danes are amazing people, but yet you are different, so you're not going to be embraced. So this is not too dissimilar from a child on the autism spectrum that has a hard time expressing themselves or reading emotions from other people. And that was the genesis of creating a robot companion that understands human emotions, can create a deep relationship with a child, and then help them exercise and practice these social skills such as eye contact, turn-taking, joint attention, and so on, so that the child has a chance of being successful in their society.
Thank you. Regina, what can AI do when it comes to understanding cancer that humans can't?
So I think that in cancer and in many other diseases, the big question is always how do you deal with uncertainty? And unfortunately, today we rely on humans who don't have this capacity to make predictions. And as a result, many times people get wrong treatments or they are diagnosed much later. And one question that really troubled me is, how late I was diagnosed. And when we already developed a model, I came back to my own mammograms, and we discovered that the mammograms 2 years earlier already had on it a tiny, small cancer. Now, for human eye, for radiologists, it's impossible to diagnose it because it's so confusing. There's so many other spots on your tissue. So what AI can do, it can do a lot of tasks which humans cannot do, take all the data that we have and remove the guessing out of diagnosis and treatment.
Thank you. David, AI had already defeated the reigning grandmaster Garry Kasparov at chess well before you started your project AlphaGo. And the rules of Go sound quite simple. Basically, on each turn, a player puts down a counter on the board, and you gain territory by connecting your counters, and the player with the most territory at the end of the game wins. So why is it harder for a computer to beat a human at Go than at chess, which sounds more complicated?
So the game of Go is this very beautiful and elegant game where it seems at first glance like the rules are very simple, but once you start to understand it, a bit like unpeeling an onion, you discover more and more layers of complexity. And what's amazing is that when humans play this game, they basically, you ask them to describe how they did something, they really don't know. They've used incredible intuition. And so these amazing professional players who've devoted their entire lives to this game have built this incredible intuition and creativity. And intuition and creativity are two traits which were previously considered to be very human and very hard to build into machines. So while chess, it was possible to succeed just with tactical look ahead, in the game of Go, that wasn't enough because early on in the game, you just have this handful of stones on the board, and you really just have to imagine what the game will pan out like, 300 moves later, with this sort of intuitive sense of where it will go. And that required some major breakthroughs.
Paolo, debatably even more complex than Go is human children. Your human-centered robot forms an emotional bond with children. How can a robot do that?
Well, first of all, it's important to make clear that the robot is not meant to replace the need for human contact. It's really almost like training wheels to teach children the social skills and then be able to practice those in real life. The way the robot forms bond is that humans are wired to bonding. We create connections with inanimate objects all the time. I mean, with a robot that has eyes, can make eye contact, can smile back at you, and can speak to you and express emotion and empathy, it's actually not that hard to create a bond there. And children open up to these robots very quickly in ways that they may not even open up to their therapists or parents.
Thank you, Paolo. Regina, you not only made an impact on oncology, your team at MIT used AI to discover what could be our first new antibiotic in 3 decades. It seems it can be E. coli, MRSA, and strains of bacteria which are currently resistant to all other antibiotics. So I think we all wish it success. How did you do that?
So I should say that, developing antibiotics is not an area with an immense competition, even though the resistance to antibiotics that we have continues to grow. This happened to be an area where pharmaceutical companies are not very active because economically it doesn't work for them. So in some ways we do need to have alternative approaches. I met a colleague and he was from biological engineering, he was working on antibiotics, and he was describing the big problem of finding new molecules which are effective against bacteria, drug-resistant bacteria, but at the same time are not toxic to humans. They had some molecules screened against, I think, E. coli. We started with that, and then we just gave to the machine, thousands of molecules, and for each molecule you knew whether it kills a bacteria or not. And it was kind of the first attempt to learn automatically how do you look at the structure of the molecule and predict whether it would have a desired effect. We found molecule that didn't look like something human created, and it turns out in the lab that it was able to kill using a different mechanism of action, kill it in a different way, and that's what made it so effective against so many different species.
David, let's go back to you. So far, we've been talking about systems designed to perform one task. That's known as narrow AI. But you're working towards artificial general intelligence. Could you explain what artificial general intelligence is?
So if you think about humans and human intelligence, it's this wonderful and beautiful thing where we're able to learn skills which are incredibly diverse, where one person might choose to specialize in learning how to play tennis, and another person might specialize in becoming an amazing chef, and another person a pianist, and another person a scientist. And so when we want to build artificial intelligence, we want systems which not only solve a single problem, but in a similar manner to humans are able to approach any number of problems with intelligence that's capable of doing amazing things in each of those different areas. And that's what we refer to as artificial general intelligence, or AGI for short.
And how far off do you think we are from that being a reality?
So I think it's going to be a spectrum over many years. And I also think it's likely, or at least plausible, that there are many breakthroughs that are still required before we can really crack the same kind of level of intelligence that humans have.
Regina, you've developed AI to better predict cancer, but it's only employed in a tiny number of cases, right? Why is AI not used more widely in medicine?
The problem is that we're creating a lot of great technology, but this technology is not really translated into patient care. And if I would ask the audience, how many of you, when you last time see your physician, you actually have seen any AI? And I'm sure not many can really attest to it. So I think the technology for many of the tasks is really mature, but there are many other questions which have nothing to do with AI per se. One is the regulations both in Europe, UK, US continue to change. Another big problem is people don't really know how to bill for AI. And today the American doctor who uses AI loses money when they see the patient, so it's not much of the motivation.
So just to clarify there, did you say that using AI for doctors in the US can actually make them lose money because it makes treatment more effective and therefore they're charging for less?
There was, I'm referring to a specific paper, the way the billing is done, it somehow relates to the time the doctor spends with the patient. So if you have something that makes it faster, you're actually losing money.
Very depressing. Paolo, what about your challenges? The robot you've developed mimics human behavior. What's next?
I'm very hopeful with what we are doing in terms of creating social, emotional AI systems that can help humanity become its best. If we can intervene early with children, for instance, on the autism spectrum, they have a chance of really integrating well with the society and do really well. When we think about other vulnerable areas of our life is when we age. Social isolation, being lonely, and that leads to mental health issues, that leads to physical health issues, and so on. We can have the same systems become a companion that help you there. Once we figure out the physical task, you can also imagine that they can give you assistive care, meaning that they can be not only be a social emotional companion for you, but they can also be a companion saying, let's cook some food together, let's go for a walk together, and so on, which is going to help a lot with independent living with dignity when we are at that age.
Do you think we'll see robots helping with assistive care in the future anytime soon, or is this way off in the distance?
I think it is within the next decade.
Oh, wow. David, you're working on Gemini, which is Google's answer to ChatGPT, and you aim for it to be able to do both tax returns and write a novel. People would probably be very happy to have their tax returns done, or I would definitely would be. But novels, should we really be letting AI sort of take over human culture?
So it's a great question. I think I wouldn't see it as taking over human culture. I think what will happen, or the most likely outcome, is that we'll be providing an incredibly powerful tool to human authors. So we've already seen this in a number of areas where we've developed technologies that enable authors of different kinds of media to basically create things much more powerfully using tools. So for example, there's a music authoring system called Lyria that was released recently. And there's this wonderful footage of will.i.am when he's playing with it for the first time. And he's just so excited because he says it can kind of speed up his songwriting process by 10 or 100 times. So I think what I really hope we get to is a world in which the AI and the humans kind of work together to just make everything better. So I'm excited to be in a world where we have much more, the most amazing novels that we can imagine, which go far beyond the ones we have today.
Thank you, David. Thank you. This is The Engineers, Intelligent Machines from the BBC World Service. We've discussed medical AI, emotionally intelligent robots, the goal of artificial general intelligence, and the threats AI might pose. Has anyone got a question on anything we've discussed so far? Wow. Okay, pretty much everyone has a hand up, so this is going to be tricky. Could we start with the man in the red shirt? If you could stand up and say your name and your question. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name's Simon, and the British government wants to make Britain a leader in AI and sees the way to do this by making it a safe space. They're looking at doing that by making sure you can't develop AI where you don't understand the consequences before you develop it. Does the panel think that's the right approach?
So yes, David, what do you think about legislation around AI?
I think we need some kind of regulation. I think it's an area which clearly is going to have more and more consequence and impact on society. So I think regulation is important. I think some of the areas which have been agreed by in various summits over the last year are a fantastic start. One thing I would say is I think it's hard sometimes to come up with like a one-size-fits-all recipe for AI, because it's so different in different areas. So, the regulation that you might need in medicine might look quite different to the kind of regulation you might need for, say, a chatbot. So I think, we have to look at each area separately and make sure that whatever we do, we really fully understand the consequences of what the impact of AI will be in that area.
There's a lot of anxiety about the pace AI is moving, right? We have people resigning, leaders in the field to campaign for more safeguarding against the threat of misinformation, the threat to jobs, and even an existential risk to humanity. Regina?
I actually feel quite opposite. People are really suffering. There are lots of incurable diseases. It's hard for patients. It's hard for their families. There is a lot of technologies that is out there, and because we cannot get together, put the regulation in place, make the payers take part of it, and find a way to bring it, I think we are really making many people suffer.
Thank you. Paolo, what about robots? Are they going to take all our jobs?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. We've got it. We finally have an answer. Thank you, Paolo.
On a serious note, I feel it's a bit of a conundrum to think about legislation because on one hand, yes, there are definitely risks and you would like to regulate it so no one with bad intentions goes wild. On the other hand, if you think about it, it's an extremely potent technology, could change everything in our lives, including being strategically important technology to master from a national perspective. And from that perspective, if you regulate it, let's say part of the regulation is slow it down, what are our adversaries going to do? Are they going to then have an advantage over us? So it's a bit of an arms race, and I think for that reason, practically speaking, I think it's going to be very hard to regulate it to that level unless you can have international regulation and agreement across all the powerful nations to say this is how we're going to handle it. And I haven't seen that work out very well in the history of time.
Fair enough. Audience, we have time for a couple more questions, so hands up. If we could go to the man in the white top. Thank you.
Hello, panel. My name's Rob Sheath, and I'm a business and sports coach. And I'm wondering whether what you've been talking about is possible for helping humans to improve their performance at a sport.
Good question. Who's our greatest sport enthusiast? Perhaps this one is for you, David. Can we be using AI to improve sports performance?
It's a great question. There's a lot of really amazing research that's happening to try and do just that. You know, one thing which we've been doing at Google DeepMind is actually a collaboration with Liverpool Football Club to try and help them improve their tactics. So that's one example. I think, you know, the amazing thing about sports is it's become, over time, so refined in terms of the particular approaches that people take that actually, you know, really they're very open to new discoveries and new ways to do things. And so it's been really fun actually just watching that kind of thing unfold.
Very cool. Thank you, David. I can see we've got lots of young people in the audience, some teenagers even. Does any of our younger audience have a question? If so, stick your hand up. There was a young lady who had a hand up here with a ponytail. Yes.
As AI develops, I reckon that humans probably depend more on AI and maybe learn less. Is there anything we could do to maybe make sure that as AI develops, humans still develop and learn?
Ooh, good question. So will we stop learning as AI does the learning instead for us? I'm going to put that to all of you if that's all right. What do you think, David?
I'd like to imagine a world where we have an AGI, which is like our personal friend, assistant, teacher, and everything we do, it understands what we want to learn and it knows just how to teach us and help us to learn more and more and more and more.
Regina, what do you think? Do you think we're just going to end up relying on AI for everything?
As a non-native speaker of English, I remember as a young professor, I spent humongous amount of time like reading my papers and making sure, you know, because in my native language, we don't have "and" there, so I make a lot of mistakes when I write. I see now how I write papers. Actually, it removes a lot of my pressure in writing, and I can really focus on ideas rather than doing the small things. So I hope that we will find a symbiosis. We don't really, remove our basic skills, but we can just do more and focus on the things that we can do better.
Paolo?
I would like to imagine if Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein had access to these tools today. I mean, as prolific as they were at a time where we didn't even have our calculators, imagine what they would have done and the impact it would have had on the world if they had access to these tools. In the next 5 years, potentially, you don't need to code. You will just tell your favorite AI system and say, I want a code that does X, Y, Z, and you can accomplish what would take years of many people in hours today. So it will make you more prolific.
Thank you. I think it's fair to say all three of you have given us hope for the future. Audience, thank you so much for your questions. I wish we could take more, but I'm afraid we're out of time. That's it for the Engineers Intelligent Machines at Imperial College London. I'm Caroline Steele. On behalf of the BBC World Service, our partners, the Royal Commission for the Exhibition of 1851, and my producer, Charlie Taylor, please join me in giving a warm round of applause for our brilliant, pioneering AI engineers, Regina Barzilai, Paolo Pigionian, and David Silva.